Hello, everyone. Welcome. Let us know where you're coming in from. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We have a very wide audience here. I'll just start. We've got Kiara from Lathrop, and we've got Haley from Atlas, Stripe Atlas, I should say. You were with Atlas before it became Stripe Atlas, is that right?
Atlas has always been Stripe Atlas
Has it?
from the very
Really? I
beginning.
thought it was. It started off as its own thing.
No, it was born and bred within Stripe.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm confused on that one, but anyway, look at all the comments we've got coming in. So people from Ghana, Puerto Rico. Yes, very wide audience here. Pakistan at midnight. Thank you for joining us. I'm in the same boat. It is 2:30 a.m. here in Australia. So I've actually just woken up not too long ago and ready to go all night. Southern California, beautiful. Anyway, let's jump into it. Kiara and Haley have been talking a little bit about how they can support you, and I best let them introduce themselves and talk about what they do to help founders like yourself.
You want to start, Haley?
Sure. So Haley Halverson, I work on Stripe Atlas, which is a product that helps founders start companies. So I was actually just looking at the numbers. We just crossed 78,000 companies that have started on Stripe Atlas since we began back in 2016. And what Atlas does is we help you set up a company in the US. We've just found that we have a lot of demand for setting up a US company, so that's what we focused on so far. We help you incorporate in the state of Delaware. We get you a tax ID from the IRS, which is something that you'll need to open a bank account and hire employees and eventually to file your taxes, hopefully when you're making a profit for your business. And we also set up the company with all of the legal documents you need to get started. So to operate your business, you'll need bylaws. You'll need to issue equity to your founders. You'll need to set aside equity for future employees. And all of that is accomplished through Stripe Atlas, which is an online service. It takes about 5-10 minutes to fill out, depending on how thoughtful you want to be with some of your selections. And then in a couple of days, you've got your company incorporated and you're ready to go. You're ready to start fundraising, hiring, opening a bank account, charging your first customers.
And I'm Kiara. I am a lawyer. I am the head of the Technology Transactions Group and Privacy Compliance Group at lathrop. I've been practicing for a very long time. So I've seen all the trends in technology over the years, which is really fun to work with startups. I have some medium-sized companies that we help as well as public companies, more on the specialist side, or when they need extra assistance in their deals or closing end of quarter contracts and such.
Beautiful. All right, I'm going to jump into the background, and I'll let you two chat about some of the problems that you regularly deal with and how you fix them. I'll bring up some questions as we go along.
Yeah, great. Any area you want to start with, Kiara?
Well, I can take the IP side, and I only received 2 questions in advance. One is, how do I protect my ideas or business? So on the IP side, there's various types of IP, different ways to protect your IP. You can't just protect your idea. On the idea side, I would say having NDAs, that's a simple one. When you're talking to other companies or people, you always want to have non-disclosure agreement in place. And then on protectable IP, there's different types. So there's patents that protects new and useful inventions. On the other hand, there's trade secrets. So you wouldn't have a patent and a trade secret on the same thing. A trade secret, you can think of it like the Coca-Cola recipe. Something that forever, perpetually will have value. Whereas for a patent, you would, patents only last about 20 years. So it's going to be something that's stale in 20 years. And you'd want to evaluate with your lawyers, as to whether a patent protection or trade secret protection is most relevant or what works for you. Patents can be quite expensive to file for, versus trade secrets, you're only really needing the contracts to protect that and policies in place inside of the company. There's also copyrights that you can protect your IP. That would be protecting your source code or books, something tangible that's written down, really. Copyrights, at least in the US, you receive that protection automatically on creating them, but registration gives you more benefits and ability to sue in federal court and get certain damages. And then there's trademarks, that's your company name and logos and branding. In the US, we have a different system than a lot of other countries. Outside of the US, it's the first to file. If you're first to file that mark, you get that name. Versus in the US, it's really first to use. So there can be uses in a certain geography. But again, filing widespread for the US, you get to use that circle R registered trademark symbol, in additional certain rights and benefits for filing lawsuits in court. I would say there's a couple things that I see time and time again with startups, and things to think about regarding common mistakes that I see. One is not addressing chain of title of your IP properly from the get-go. The founders need to assign the IP to the company. You need all the proper documents with your employees and contractors. Making sure you're not taken advantage of by a large company. Sometimes you might be assigning IP to a large company when really you're just a service or a SaaS platform, for example. And third, I would say, is if you get wedded to your name before doing proper trademark clearances, and you want to take a look at that, you can even do that on your own, looking at WIPO and online in Google. Just don't get married to that name and love it so much, and then you don't want to change it, but you really have to. Those are just a few things I see over and over again. Haley, what about you on the corporate side and formation?
Yeah. So it sounds like we have a really global crew here. I'm sure one top question on people's minds is, should I incorporate in the US when I'm setting up my business? It's a great question. And, obviously everyone's business context is different, but I can tell you a few main reasons why people do choose to incorporate in the US, because actually a lot of Atlas's users are around the world. We've incorporated people in, I think, 191 different countries, so almost all of them. But main reasons to want to set up a company in the US, you want access to investors. A lot of investors are US based, and they won't invest in your entity that you've set up in, say, Spain. They'll ask you to incorporate a business in the US because that's easier for them to manage from their own administrative and taxation purposes. People also like the US for ease of doing business. Not every market is as easy and favorable to business creation, and also then the ongoing administration of what it takes to run a business. So the US is favorable in that regard. As Chiara's been talking about, obviously intellectual property protections are really sound in the US. So that's another reason if you're in a market where maybe that's less assured. And then finally, access to the US market and all of the customers there, as well as all of the potential employees. So if you're looking to expand into the US because you know that there's a really big market for whatever you're building, it might end up easier for you to have a US entity that you can run your sales through, as well as hire employees, local employees, if you're thinking about having people who will sell your product based in the US. So those are all really common reasons. A follow-up to that people might then ask themselves is like, okay, I do want to incorporate in the US. What type of company should I set up? So common company types in the US are LLCs and corporations. There are other types, but those are the most common and the most likely two between which you might be choosing. And the kind of general rule of thumb that you should use, and obviously this is complex, but if we're going to distill it down, a general rule of thumb is if you plan on raising venture capital and if you plan on issuing equity to your employees, you'll want a corporation because that structure just makes it a lot easier to do those things. If you don't plan on raising money, so if you plan on bootstrapping and you don't plan on giving equity to your employees, you can maybe go with an LLC. And the reason why you might prefer an LLC is there's something called pass-through taxation, where if you have a loss on your business, you can actually deduct that from your personal income taxes. So that's one reason why someone who's early stage, who anticipates a lot of losses, who doesn't want to raise any money, might go with an LLC. But if you are seeking investment or want to give equity to employees, C Corp it is definitely the preferred option. And I see a question here. Can you establish a Delaware C Corp not being a U.S. citizen? Yes, you can. No restrictions against that. I see another question. When should we incorporate? From what moment? It's an excellent question, one to which there's definitely no firm answer. It really does depend. So triggers might be you have an investor who's like, great, where do I send the check? What's your business bank account routing number? And you think, oh goodness, okay, time to go. I'm going to incorporate so I can set up a bank account for my newly formed company. You might also do it because you realize that your business is starting to grow and you want to protect your own assets against anything potentially going wrong with your company. So let's say something goes wrong and someone sues you. If you haven't incorporated, your personal assets could be claimed in some sort of lawsuit against you. And so by setting up a company, you've divided your liability and that just sits with the company. So your personal assets are protected. Also, as we talked about, sorry, Kiara, go ahead.
I would just jump in there. From the legal side, the earlier the better. But like you're saying, you want to protect your assets. So if you're going to start getting seed round money or other cash in the door, then you do need to have the entity set up ahead of time.
Yeah. It also makes it a lot easier if you want to hire someone. If you hire, you can hire someone as kind of a sole proprietor, so not incorporated. But then if you do incorporate your business, you'll have to redo all the paperwork again. So it just adds complication from kind of like a business management, from a tax perspective, from an administrative perspective. So if you know that you're going to build a thing and you're ready, that might be a good time to incorporate. Obviously, it comes with obligations as well, right? So once you have a business, then you do have to pay taxes. You need to do various filings. So you need to make sure that you really are ready to go and you know the responsibilities that come along with it. Any questions you want to pick out in the chat, Kiara?
Yeah, so and I know there's various questions below, but on the liability that Haley was just talking about, so the laws do change over time, and they're constantly changing, especially now with there's new privacy laws, there's new AI laws, and this is worldwide. So there can be all kinds of liability. People can sue your company for a host of reasons. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Even on the IP side, you can infringe a patent without even knowing. I mean, that's actually quite easy to do because there's no way to know every patent out there. It's just impossible. So there's a lot of potential liability. So having that proper incorporation and keeping up the proper corporate maintenance and records is important.
Let's see. My clients are wellness professionals in Argentina and Uruguay. Which payment methods can I offer? So you can offer any payment method that's available to Stripe, available to you as a Stripe user. So once you set up a company with Atlas, you separately apply for Stripe payments, and Stripe payments has global payment methods. So we're Stripe. I'm not personally working on this, but we Stripe are working really hard to get better global coverage of local payment methods in all different markets. How hard is it to go from an LLC to a C Corp? You can do it. You can definitely convert from LLC to C Corp. There are various things that you need to do. And the more complex your business has become, the more difficult it is to convert. So once you've done more stuff, you'll need to set that up again in your new business structure. One other thing that might be of interest to this group as well is something called qualified small business stock, QSBS. It's basically a set of tax benefits that you can have if you have a corporation, a C Corp, that don't accrue to LLCs. With QSBS, if you've held the equity in your business for 5 years, although there's actually a new rule where you start to get benefits around 3 years now, you can sell that stock tax-free up to an amount of $15 million. So like a really big benefit to having held onto that stock in a C corporation for a long time. And so you'll often hear people talk about like starting the QSBS clock. And that's one reason why, if you know you're going to want a C Corp eventually, you might just want to start with one now so you can start that clock sooner. Because otherwise you might find yourself in a situation where you've only held the equity for 3 years, say, and you don't get the full benefit of QSBS when you sell that equity. What is the best state to incorporate? It seems like a lot of corporations are flooding away from Delaware. That is a great question. So this is something that obviously, as at Stripe Atlas, we're watching super closely. There was a lot of talk online about moving to other states. I think with people who are seeking VC funding, we actually haven't yet seen that play out. So I know A16D just put out an announcement. They're moving out of Delaware and are counseling startups to do the same. We've also seen a lot of larger corporations move their domicile to different states. The data isn't yet showing any change kind of more broadly. So I actually just pulled these numbers. Overall business formation, like US wide in June, was up 7% year over year. So like every company started in the US. Delaware C Corp formations were up 40% year over year in June. So we've actually just seen a huge boom in May, June, continuing in July right now, of people who are setting up Delaware C Corps. So look, like I'm not going to weigh in on what's the best. I'll just tell you the data of what people are doing. We obviously are watching really closely. And if all of a sudden we hear a ton of entrepreneurs saying, you know, actually I'm talking to investors and they want me to be incorporated in Nevada, then we're going to look really hard at our product and think about offering a Nevada service. But we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. And on the legal side, a lot of this is tax driven, so you should talk to your tax advisors as well. But if you do want that VC funding, it's still Delaware's preferred. But we are seeing a lot of companies incorporate in Wyoming, especially just if they're going to be an LLC.
Yeah, LLC for sure. If you don't plan to raise, you've got a lot more flexibility. What are some of the fundamentals to be aware of to prepare in the first year filing for a company? I'm not actually quite sure what the question's getting at. Maybe some like things you might not know. I've got a few things you might not know that you might want to know. So one thing top of mind for me, if you are setting up a corporation and you're granting you and your co-founders equity that vests, you definitely want to file something that's called an 83B election. It's a document that you send off to the IRS, which is the US's tax agency. You have to send it off to them. So it has to be in the mail within 30 days of you having received your equity from the business. If it's not in the mail within 30 days, you haven't filed it. And the reason why you very much want to file it is it could save you a lot of money on your personal income taxes in the future. So basically what it does is it allows you to pay tax on your equity at the value that you've received it, as opposed to the value that it has when it vests in the future. So let's say you had 4-year vesting, and you know when you set up your company, your equity rounds to zero in terms of value. So we assume, and I know a lot of lawyers when they set up companies assume that your company's worth $100 when you set it up. So your equity, if you split it 50-50 with a co-founder, is worth $50. So paying tax on $50, no big deal. But let's say 2 years down the track, when you're another quarter of your equity vests in your 4-year vesting schedule, your company is worth $10 million. All of a sudden, you own something that's worth $5 million. And well, you're getting a quarter of it that year. But anyway, you'd have to pay tax on that much larger number. So really important. You definitely want to file it. It's something that Atlas helps you with as just kind of like bundled with our product. Kiara, anything that comes top of mind to you, something to be aware of?
Well, I would say not necessarily prior to formation, but once you are formed, and especially if you want to prepare for any seed rounds or VC funding, you just want to have all your ducks in order. Again, those assignment agreements from employees and contractors and the founders, having protected your confidential information with NDAs, and just a strategy going forward. And investors are going to want to see those documents and see that you're prepared and have clean IP for the company.
Brenton, I see someone's asking for some of the questions in the form that they filled out. I don't know that I have those at hand. And anything that you want to ask us? Anything your dog wants to ask us? Because I can't hear you.
Sorry, that might be it. Roxy, have you got any questions? No. Okay.
Not right.
Jesse did create a document. Let me find that for you.
While you're doing that, I see,
Yes.
Are there a minimum number of people needed to open a company? No, a single person can open a company.
There was a question there about if you've got a team of founders that are global, what's the best way of approaching it if you've got people from different countries? Does that have any impact at all?
It shouldn't. So I think in the same way that you would if you're all in the same country, you should decide what jurisdiction is the best for you to set up your company in. So choose the place where you want to form your company. I can't speak to any other countries because Stripe Atlas only serves the US, but in the US, it doesn't matter where your founders are located. You can be anywhere. You don't need any one of you to actually be in the US. The only thing that could be slightly different in your process is getting that tax ID from the government. So if you have a US social security number and an address and a phone number, you can get it really quickly. If you don't have one of those things, so let's say you don't have a US social security number, it'll take you a few weeks just because the IRS uses fax machines still to process those applications. Again, all things that Atlas does for you.
Most liked question, can I use my existing company to start a new software-related business?
Interesting.
And if you did, I guess another question would be, would you recommend that? If it was viable.
Do you mean another product? Well,
entirely, I presume.
If it's another product line, I think that's fine to do. Investors like to see companies not just having one product.
Yeah, from my understanding, the question is more of I've got an entirely new business, completely different business model, not related to anything I do currently.
I guess I'd want to know why, like to what end. It might be simpler and cleaner just to set up something new and similar. Actually, maybe like the flip side of what Kiara said, your investors might be confused as to why you're building something totally different as part of your same business, presuming you're seeking investment.
Or if it's tangential, it could be a sub, or you could set up another entity.
Mm-hmm. Where do you find, or how do you create your basic legal documents for your website or app? Terms of service, privacy policies, those sorts of things.
Where do you create them? Was that the question?
Correct. Or how do you create them? Probably be a better one.
Well, so that's a lot of what I do, helping companies with their terms of service, their SaaS agreements, their enterprise agreements, negotiating those when they get wildly successful and have all kinds of big companies subscribing to their application, and helping on the privacy compliance side. I think there are some online services you can use for lower cost. They might have kind of the kitchen sink approach. You might not be subject to some of these new privacy laws because you're not big enough. So you don't necessarily want to put yourself at risk under those laws if you don't need to be. So talking to a lawyer for those documents is recommended.
Beautiful. What is the most common reason for a SaaS business getting sued? And then how to avoid that?
Well, I would say, as being a vendor, SaaS vendor, most likely being sued now is if you have a data security breach. And the company, your customer, sues you because of that. If they're getting hit with lawsuits downstream from their customers, or they've had to incur a lot of costs for remediation, bad publicity, etc., that's probably most likely, at least right now.
What is the status
keeping that security? Be really prudent with security. I mean, that's paramount.
Yep.
And minimize data you retain.
What is the status of IP and trademarks when you go to launch? At what stage should you be really focusing on trademarking or copywriting or anything along those lines?
On the trademark side, I would say earlier the better, because you don't want to go to launch and then you realize some other company has the same name in the same space. I mean, that's where you get into trouble. It doesn't matter if your company's has the same name if it's in a different type of product or area. But you want to know that well ahead of time to make sure you're okay in that regard on the names. A lot of startups don't register copyrights because at least in the US, you get ownership of the copyrights once you create the source code or app. But registration does have those additional benefits. So you can do that over time. That's not an immediate thing. Also, registering the copyright does not cost a lot of money.
Sure. This is a question which you probably have an easy response to, but I want to be an online-only company, just a website. I don't want to make it an LLC. I don't want to incorporate it as a private limited company or anything like that. I just want to be able to make money. Is that possible?
I have an answer, and I'll let Haley speak to that as well. It's certainly, sure, it's possible, but you have tax issues and liability issues, and you might not want your own home, if you own it, to be at risk for what you're doing on that website.
Yeah, I think I'd wonder what perceived downsides there are of setting up an LLC in this case.
Probably the tax implications are probably the main concern, I think, of that question. What's the right way to protect my IP if I'm integrating with a variety of other tools? If I'm using Lovable, Figma, any ChatGPT, if I'm using any of these other tools to run my business, what's the best way to protect my IP doing that?
Well, understanding the contracts you have with all those vendors and what it says about ownership of the output and what's developed is important to keep that in mind. And then you would presumably have ownership of the copyright in what you've created, as long as there's some human element of that creation.
What are the best jurisdictions for incorporating a company outside of the US? I know you only operate in the US, Haley.
That very much depends on your goals for your business. So again, some of the same reasons I listed as to why people choose the US, you might want to evaluate other markets on those fronts as well. So like, where and whom do you want to raise money from? Where do you want to sell your product? Where do you want to hire your employees? Where are you personally based? Where do you like the taxation policy? Where do you like the laws regarding businesses and what it takes to do business? And so I'd use all of those factors to look at other geographies you might be considering and decide whether that feels right for you.
All right. Go back to some questions we've got here. How long does it take to register an LLC or corporation if you are outside of the US, non-citizen?
No difference to being within the US. So we, for Atlas, we use an expedited service with Delaware. It's basically next day turnaround to have your business incorporated. And then, as I mentioned, it could be a couple weeks to get that tax ID from the IRS. But that doesn't always prevent you from doing what you want to do. So you can still use Stripe payments. You can open a bank account with one of our partners. So yeah, you can get going pretty quickly, even if you're outside of the US.
Do you have a minimum capital to start a company with Stripe, Atlas?
No, I mean the service costs $500, so I guess that's the minimum capital requirement. But no, you don't have to have anything invested into your business already.
Yep. All right. Oh, we already went. Sorry. Can your code be protected when vibe coding on Lovable? So Lovable builds all the coding for you, does everything for you. Do you actually own the code when you have your app at the end?
I would need to look at Lovable's terms. I believe they do give you the ownership of the output, though.
Yes, I believe that's the case.
Yeah, most companies on AI creation platforms are giving ownership of the output to their users.
For Haley, how many minimum partners are needed to open a company, or just a single person is fine?
Answered this one already. Single person is fine.
Yep. Good.
I would also chime in on one of those prior questions on the minimum capital. You still want to have some capital in the business. It can be minimal, but just to make sure that that satisfies corporate formalities and it's not undercapitalized going forward for protection. Because if you don't have adequate capitalization, the government can say, you can be sued personally. We're going to pierce the corporate veil, it's called. Even though you have the protection of a LLC or corporation, you didn't properly capitalize the company. It's kind of a shell. So you need to have some additional capital in there as well.
Is that sort of like a trading insolvent type rule, or is that more to prevent shell companies itself?
I think it's a little of both. Okay. I would say.
I'm wondering if it's possible to convert to a C Corp using Stripe Atlas, even if I didn't originally incorporate there.
It's a great question. Unfortunately, no, we don't do conversions right now. Something we're thinking about, and interesting to hear that you could potentially use that product.
Kiara, this is a question that was asked earlier on. Rough figure of what it costs. I believe at the time you were talking about exploring the market for trademarks, for any other potential infringements.
Yeah. So on the IP prosecution side, so getting those IP protections, a patent that can cost a lot. That can be like $20,000 to get a patent. And patents take a while to get. It can be a couple of years before you get the patent. And then there's limited protection period. On the trademark side, it's probably $2,500-ish, maybe copyright $500 about. And then for different contracts, that just kind of depends on what you're doing, what your product is, and if there's negotiation or if it's a form.
How do you go about arranging the equity split and vesting shares for future employees and versus investors as well?
Yeah, great question. It depends. It depends a lot on your business and your founders. But I think a common kind of mental heuristic that people like to use is, how have we each contributed in the past, kind of leading up to the moment where we're formalizing the equity splits, and how do we think we're going to contribute in the future? And maybe the answer to that truly is exactly the same, but I think oftentimes people then find, well, it's actually not quite exactly the same. Other things that you can think about is if someone started working on your company before the other co-founders, you might want to have their equity vesting start sooner to recognize those contributions. So, setting aside the split, maybe they start to earn it sooner than some of the other founders who came on later. So yeah, it's like a very personal decision and depends a lot on how you're thinking about your roles in the company. In terms of future employees, it's very common to set aside an equity pool for future employees. So basically, when you're setting up your company, you authorize a certain number of shares. A kind of industry default is 10 million. You might set aside some of those that are authorized but not actually issued to anyone, so that when future employees come around, you've got a pool ready to go. We kind of set the default in Stripe Atlas to 10% because that's kind of like across the many years of seeing people toggle that to different numbers. That's roughly the average. But it really does depend on the type of business that you're building and the type of people you feel like you want to hire. So let's say you're going to hire a very senior person right near the beginning. You might want a bigger option pool so that you can accommodate that. Or let's say you actually think you're going to keep your team really lean. Maybe you won't need 10%. Maybe you need something smaller. But also important to note that if you don't have an option pool from the get-go, if you then do raise some money, investors will often ask you to create one because they want to see that you're setting the business up for success and have set aside that equity in a way that won't dilute their investment in your business.
Beautiful. Just on that, I mean, you touched a little bit, but once you establish your C Corp and you engage some board advisors, how much equity would you provide to board advisors?
That's a very good question. And I think depends a lot on stage of business as well. I know I'm not going to quote an exact number because I know there are some good online guides that basically show you like data by stage of company, like basically how mature are you, therefore how much might you want to give to an advisor. Carta publishes some really great stuff. And like Carta is just a really good survey of the market because so many people use them. So I'd counsel you to go look at Carta's reports to get some good ranges.
I have a company wordmark, I have a company name, a character logo. Should I trademark each one, or am I covered once I file for LLC?
So the LLC formation doesn't protect your trademark rights. So you would need trademark protection. And again, trademarks are geographic. So you can file them in the US. You would also want to consider filing wherever you're doing business, where you're incorporated, and where you're selling your products.
Yep. In South Africa, corporate tax is 17%. What is it like in Delaware? I'm sure there's some places in the world that are more competitive than that as well.
It's a good question. I think it's sub 10%. I don't know the exact number. But it's seen to be one of the most business favorable taxation states, which again is why people have historically chosen Delaware.
I guess
there are also some states where it is zero, by the way.
That's sort of something I was going to touch on. It. The states operate in such a different way to everywhere else in the world. Most places in the world, the tax rate is a lot of other places in the world. You don't have a state level tax rate for companies. Certainly here in Australia, all states pays the same amount. So obviously tax scheme is going to vary wherever you are in the world. Just go see a tax advisor. Find out what's best for you. I think that might be most of the questions. I mean, we sort of touched on this before. Should multiple brands or verticals be treated differently if you're doing different businesses within the same entity? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think it depends on what you're doing. What your goals are, how if you have a board or investors, what they think you should be doing. Sometimes maybe you're forming an entity to provide a service to your entity plus to other customers. So there can be intercompany agreements. You could form a sub. So it really depends.
In the age of AI, where you could duplicate an app so easily, does securing a patent on this process matter so much? Does it really protect you, given how fast people can build now?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of this is new, and again, it takes a while to get a patent. So I think that's something that you'd want to dig in with a patent attorney to really, and you need to determine if you even have something that's patentable, because it needs to be novel. You need to make sure there's nothing else like it, to see if you can even get that patent protection.
My startup is named Meta City. Will it be a problem from Meta, the company behind Facebook?
I mean, for all these questions, I'm not giving legal advice. This is just me talking. But you'd have to know what industry you're in, how similar it is to Meta. I mean, they have a pretty big
They cover every industry.
So I think it depends, but it might, and it's somewhat generic too, depending on what the company is doing or what the product is. You want something unique, not a generic or something that's descriptive or describing what your business does.
Oh, I've checked out MetaCity. It is not a social media platform. I think you might be safe, but I'm not providing advice either. Any other questions, people? Well, you've got Kiara and Haley here. I guess I'll just throw one out there. What's the situation that you thought you had all the T's crossed and I's dotted and everything was above board, and something happened that caught you off guard and completely ruined everything you had originally planned for? Haven't been in that situation. Everything's just been smooth sailing. This is for you.
I will say, like, what we do is such a repeated process that it's incredibly rare that there's something kind of outside of the norm. As in, we're doing some like repeated steps. There's no creativity going into this. We're like doing exactly the same steps with every company. And so when something goes wrong, it's often like a problem with the IRS. So the IRS likes to close down and, lose faxes, which, unfortunate that they're still using fax machines. So those have been the kind of problems that we've encountered, is like the IRS is losing all the faxes. And so we're not getting the tax IDs for our users.
That's crazy that they still use fax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I had a couple contracts in the past month where the other company still had, for notice provision, you have to send notices in writing to claim breach or whatever it is under the contract, and they still wanted it via fax. And I kind of pushed back on that, and they said, well, we do still use that. Surprising.
I mean, I don't even know if there's anyone who. What happens if it breaks? Are there people that still fix them? Are there still people who are employed to deal with fax machines? I don't know. Here's another question. How do you structure a holding company? What are the pros and cons of going through a holding company? This is specifically looking at someone who's got a collection of small online businesses.
That's a good question. It's not something that we do with Atlas, so I don't know that I can offer much advice here.
Yeah, I think that's really tax driven. So again, working with your accountants and tax attorneys on the structure is the best route.
If you incorporate in Delaware, how do you structure your company to also have entities overseas? Do you is Delaware the subsidiary, or are the international companies subsidiaries of the Delaware company?
It totally depends what you're trying to accomplish. So I'll give you an example. We often see people who started a business in France, say, but want to raise money from a U.S. investor. And so what they might do is incorporate a U.S.-based subsidiary of the French parent company, which allows them to accomplish that. I guess you could see the reverse, where you have someone who's based in the U.S. and wants to enter the French market. They might decide to set up a French subsidiary of the US-based company. So it really depends on your use case and what you're trying to accomplish.
And you can always do a flip. Sometimes at least in the past, investors, if the parent was, let's say, a Swedish company, they might want you to flip and have the Delaware as the parent.
Do patent protections in the US prevent companies in other jurisdictions from copying your product?
No, they don't. So you do need, if a patent is the right way to protect your IP, then you would need patent protection in those other countries. There is a patent cooperation treaty that can streamline some of the filings. And there's some time periods where you can file in one location and then you get priority in the other country.
All right, might be a bit irrelevant, might not be for you too, but if you do incorporate in the US, is that how you'll be able to get access to telecommunications? Is that something you need to do to be able to get a phone number in the US?
You don't have to, but there are lots of online services that allow you to. So you can get a virtual phone number and a virtual address that are in the US. Yeah.
Perfect. Someone build something for the IRS on Lovable. All right, that's the plan.
Please. That'll make our lives easier.
All right. You sort of touched on this before. Why would one choose Stripe Atlas over opening somewhere overseas? Because tax, well, obviously there's a lot more benefits than just tax when you incorporate in the US. Perhaps you can probably talk about that. What are the main benefits you would have of incorporating in the US versus somewhere else?
Yeah, we went through these ones, so I hope this person isn't looking for something different. But it comes down to where your investors might be and what they are asking you to do. Often, a U.S.-based investor will ask you to incorporate in the U.S., where your customers are, where you want to hire people.
Beautiful. Getting a few of the same questions. Sorry. Just a bit more technical. When do you need to kick off a 409A valuation?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to walk down the
well beyond when we see companies setting up their business. So definitely not right at the beginning.
For Chiara, could you tell more about the secret trade?
You're probably referring to trade secrets.
Yes.
So trade secrets, that's a protection of, it's like your secret sauce. Source code can be a trade secret. Again, the preeminent example is Coca-Cola recipe is a trade secret. It's something that you protect, like highest confidentiality with NDAs, internal protections, as well as externally with who you're sharing it with, or your vendors or manufacturers. And that can last forever, trade secret protection, as long as it doesn't get out, or as long as you are appropriately taking the policies and contracts to protect it.
Right. Probably more of a tax question, but what kind of things are the government or IRS looking for that they consider red flags? I saw a bit of a smile on Haley's face there.
I truly don't know. I truly don't know.
Not paying your tax, probably first one. All right. Let's go. So if you incorporate your entity, does that give you any additional access to visas, business visas, to come work there?
No, there's no specific link between you having set up a business in the US and the ability to get a visa. Um, a common way to get a visa is through company sponsorship. So it is possible to have the company that you've incorporated sponsor your visa. I do believe, though, there are some rules around ownership percentages, as in you can't own more than X amount of that company for it to sponsor your visa. So I'd be very careful about relying on this as your methodology. I know also like some people in technical fields are able to go for what's called an O1 visa, which is an alien of extraordinary ability. If you've got lots of like research that's published, or if you're in certain professions, that's another path. But lots of the visa applications for the US are pretty onerous in terms of getting work visa. There's a lot required to kind of prepare a dossier of evidence that you should be getting that visa. So yeah, more than can be covered in a quick 1 minute answer.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to have that title, an alien of exceptional talent. You know,
Yeah.
that's what you got to aspire to in life.
Well, I know models fall into that category. So if you've got a secret modeling career on the side, maybe that could be your title.
Thanks for thinking of me, Haley. Appreciate it. What are some resources for founders to know how to get ready for investor presentations?
That's a great question. I really like YC's startup school materials. They've got a ton of YouTube videos online covering every topic that you might be interested in. I've watched a bunch of them. Highly recommend.
Um, do you provide advice on licensing IP to leverage another company's corporate structure and benefits? Kiara, that one.
I'm not sure exactly what this is asking, but if you're talking about licensing IP between companies, so if you need to use another company's IP, then yes, we help with that.
When I open a company in the US, are there any mandatory compliances I need to know for web apps?
So there are. So unfortunately, in the U.S., we don't have a comprehensive privacy law like a lot of regions, like the EU or other countries have. So there's privacy laws you have to think about. There's AI laws now in the states. I think there's 4 states now. We're not going to have, in my prediction, comprehensive privacy or AI law in the near future. So looking at those, you need to have a privacy policy for your app.
Now, you talked a bit before about swapping parent companies and subsidiaries around. How easy is that process?
Like with all things with your corporate structure, you need to file documents and make sure that you are clear on the taxation implications as well. So it, all is doable. Everything is changeable, but requires, hiring a lawyer, hiring a tax professional to make sure you're doing it right.
Right. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there. That's covered most of the questions. If people want to find out more information, where should they be going? I'll start with Kiara.
More information generally?
More information to say if they wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to get your advice.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on our website. My email's kiara.portner@lathropgpm.com. But you can look me up and send me an email.
Perfect. And Haley?
Yeah, our Stripe Atlas's website, stripe.com/atlas. There's lots of information linked there. And if you want to get in touch with me, it's my last name at stripe.com.
Beautiful. And I believe that Stripe Atlas has been on the joint secret platform that we have open to our members. So if you feel like you need to go incorporate, go check out. There is a discount there. Get you a head start. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the knowledge and information you've shared. And is there anything that you wanted to ask the team while you've got them here? Any advice you want to throw out? Final words, please. Let me know.
I can't wait to see what you're all building.
Awesome. We will have an online gallery of all the builds.
Amazing.
Hopefully releasing next week. That will give us sort of overview of what they've built and hopefully some pitch videos you'll be able to watch. Yeah, I'll send you the link once that's live later next week, I believe.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.